I was standing in front of the mirror in the groom's room at St. Michael's Church, trying to smooth the sleeves of a rented tuxedo that didn't quite fit when my phone buzzed. 15 minutes before my daughter was supposed to walk down the aisle, I smiled before I looked at the screen. I figured Emily had forgotten something. Maybe she wanted me to bring her lipstick. Maybe she was nervous and needed to hear, "You're going to be just fine." Instead, I read, "Dad, don't walk me down the aisle. My husband's family would be ashamed to see you." I read it again, then a third time. The room suddenly felt too quiet. I could hear the old air conditioner humming above me and someone laughing somewhere down the hallway. Outside, church bells began their noon chime, one slow note at a time. My hands didn't shake. They just stopped feeling like mine. I stared at the phone until the screen dimmed. After a while, I touched the silver chain around my neck. The wedding ring hanging from it rested against my chest, exactly where it had for almost 30 years. "My girl," I whispered. I wasn't talking to Emily. I was talking to her mother. When my wife died, Emily was 3 years old. Cancer doesn't care whether you've made plans. One spring, we were arguing about where to plant tomatoes in the backyard. By Thanksgiving, I was standing beside a hospital bed, pretending I believed the doctors when they said they were still hopeful. 3 weeks later, I buried the only woman I'd ever loved. I still remember trying to tie my black necktie with one hand while holding a crying little girl against my shoulder with the other. Emily kept asking why Mommy wouldn't wake up. I didn't have an answer. After everyone left the cemetery, I stood alone in our kitchen. There were casseroles and disposable aluminum pans stacked across every counter, because that's what people do when they don't know how to fix grief. Emily climbed into my lap. "Daddy." "Yeah, sweetheart." "Who's gonna braid my hair?" I laughed. Then I cried after she fell asleep. The next Saturday, I watched 3 different videos at the public library because I couldn't figure out how to braid a little girl's hair. The first attempts were terrible. Emily looked at herself in the mirror and giggled. "It looks funny." "I know. You can try again tomorrow." So I did, every morning until I got it right. People like to call single parents heroes. Most of us aren't. We're just too tired to quit. I worked as an electrician for almost 40 years around Columbus. Most weeks started before sunrise. My knees were good back then. My back didn't complain every time I climbed a ladder. I picked up emergency calls on weekends because overtime paid better. When somebody's water heater failed on Christmas Eve, I went. When a restaurant lost power during the 4th of July weekend, I went. Every extra dollar meant dance lessons, school trips, braces, college savings. Emily never saw the bills piling up on the kitchen table after she went to bed. She never heard me wondering whether I should replace the transmission in my old Ford F-150 or keep praying it'd survive another winter. Most kids aren't supposed to. That's the job. One February, she came down with pneumonia. I spent 3 nights sleeping in a plastic chair beside her hospital bed. A nurse offered me another blanket around 3 in the morning. "You should get some sleep." "I will." I didn't. Every time Emily coughed, I sat up. Every time she opened her eyes, I smiled like everything was under control. "Daddy, I'm here." "You didn't go to work?" "No." "Will your boss be mad?" "He'll survive." She reached over and squeezed my finger before falling asleep again. That tiny hand somehow made every missed paycheck seem unimportant. Life settled into routines. Macaroni and cheese that was usually overcooked. Saturday mornings fixing whatever had broken around the house. Little league games where I showed up wearing dusty work boots because I came straight from a job site. One afternoon, Emily hit a double into left center field. She came running toward me afterward holding a plastic trophy that probably cost $8. "Dad, did you see it?" "I saw the whole thing. I almost hit a home run." "You'll get the next one." Someone snapped a picture. Emily missing one front tooth. Me standing behind her in my work shirt with electrical tape still sticking out of my pocket. That photo stayed in a box in my living room for years. I never thought much about it. To me, it was just another Saturday. Time has a funny way of making sacrifices feel ordinary. You stop counting what you gave up. The promotions I turned down because they would have meant traveling. The weekends. The fishing trips I never took. The relationships I quietly let fade because Emily always came first. I wasn't keeping score. I was raising my daughter. When she graduated from college, she hugged me so tightly I thought my ribs might crack. "We did it, Dad." "No." I smiled. "You did." She kissed my cheek. "I couldn't have without you." I believed those words. For a long time. Hey, everything changed after she met Nathan. I actually liked him at first. Polite, educated, the kind of young man who always stood when someone older entered the room. He laughed at my bad jokes, asked questions about electrical work, Called me Mr. Carter until I finally told him to stop. Then I met his parents. Their house wasn't just big. It was the kind of place where nobody ever accidentally left muddy shoes by the door. Everything looked arranged. Even the smiles. Victoria Whitmore greeted me with perfect manners and perfectly measured warmth. "Daniel," she said, shaking my hand, "Emily has told us so much about you." I smiled. "I hope only the good parts." "Oh, families always leave out the interesting parts." She laughed softly. So did everyone else. Later that afternoon, we walked outside after lunch. My old Ford sat beside Nathan's shiny BMW. Victoria looked at my truck for a second longer than necessary. "Well," she said with another polished smile, "that truck certainly has character." I chuckled. "It gets me where I need to go." "I'm sure it does." Before I could say anything else, Emily touched my arm. "Hey, Dad." "Yeah. Next time, maybe park around the side?" She smiled as if she were asking for a tiny favor. They're a little particular about appearances. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. Then I looked at the truck. The faded paint, a scratch near the tailgate, the dent I'd never bothered fixing. "I'll remember that," I said. She hugged me before I left. But something felt different. Small, like the first loose wire inside a wall. You can't see the problem yet. You just know it's there. Over the next several months, little moments kept adding up. Emily suggested I buy newer shoes. She insisted I rent a tuxedo instead of wearing the dark suit I'd owned for years. "It'll look nicer in the pictures," she said. She wasn't wrong, so I rented one. The salesman measured my shoulders while joking that weddings were expensive. "You have no idea," I laughed. "I never imagined the tux wouldn't be the thing that didn't belong." Back in the church dressing room, I looked at my reflection one last time. The tux fit well enough. My shoes were polished. I'd even trimmed my eyebrows because Emily once teased me about them. I unlocked my phone, opened her message again. Then I typed exactly one word. "Okay." I pressed send. I slipped the phone into my pocket, rested my hand over my wife's wedding ring, and quietly walked toward the door. Daniel Carter never imagined that walking out of his daughter's wedding would be easier than walking away from the little girl he'd spent 30 years protecting. The heavy wooden church doors closed behind me with a soft click. No one called my name. No one noticed. Inside, music floated through the sanctuary while photographers hurried people into place. Bridesmaids laughed somewhere upstairs. Someone rolled a cart full of flowers across the hallway. The whole building buzzed with excitement, and somehow I slipped right through it. I walked past the first row of pews before stepping outside. Then I stopped. There it was, a white card resting neatly on the aisle seat. "Father of the bride." Someone had written it in elegant gold lettering. I picked it up, ran my thumb across the thick paper. For just a second, I pictured what I'd imagined for years. Emily slipping her arm through mine, the organ playing, me whispering, "You look beautiful," her smiling the way she used to before every school recital. Instead, I carefully placed the card back exactly where I'd found it, straight, centered, waiting for someone who wasn't coming. Then I walked away. The June sun was already warming the parking lot. My right knee complained as I climbed into my old Ford. "Easy," I muttered to myself. The knee had never been the same after surgery 3 years earlier. Most mornings it only took a few careful steps before it loosened up. Today it didn't seem interested in cooperating. I started the engine. The familiar rumble filled the cab. For several seconds I simply rested both hands on the steering wheel. The phone buzzed once. Then again. I didn't look. For 31 years, whenever Emily called, I answered. If she locked her keys inside her apartment, I came. If she needed help moving, I came. If she cried after her first serious breakup, I came. Today, I drove away. There was only one place I wanted to be. Alum Creek Lake. My wife and I used to bring sandwiches there before Emily was born. Nothing fancy. Turkey sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. Potato chips. Cheap lemonade. We'd sit on an old wooden bench overlooking the water and talk about the future as though it had already promised itself to us. I hadn't visited much after she died. Some memories are comforting. Others ask more of you than you're ready to give. The lake was quiet that afternoon. A retired couple walked their golden retriever along the trail. 2 fishermen argued cheerfully about whose bait worked better. Life as usual kept moving. I parked beneath the same maple tree we'd always chosen because it offered afternoon shade. The bench was still there, a little more weathered. So was I. I reached into the inside pocket of my tuxedo jacket. Folded carefully in thirds was the speech I'd spent nearly 3 weeks writing. I unfolded it slowly. Blue ink filled both sides of the pages. Some sentences had been crossed out, others rewritten after midnight when better words finally came. I cleared my throat. There was no audience. Just ducks gliding across the lake. My beautiful Emily. The words caught in my throat. I started again. My beautiful Emily. When your mother died, I honestly didn't know if I was strong enough to raise you by myself. Every morning, though, you'd wake up, look at me, and say one word. Daddy. That one word gave me another reason to get out of bed. I stopped reading. My glasses had fogged. I took them off, rubbed them with the corner of my shirt, then continued. I spent years trying to teach you that kindness matters more than money, character matters more than appearance, and showing up matters more than saying the perfect thing. I smiled to myself. I guess parents always hope they've taught enough. The breeze lifted one corner of the paper. I folded it closed before I reached the ending. Some words weren't ready to be spoken anymore. Across town, St. Michael's Church had begun to realize something wasn't right. At first, nobody panicked. Weddings rarely start exactly on time. Someone blamed the florist. Someone else blamed traffic. The musicians quietly repeated the processional music. Again, then again. Emily finally called. The phone vibrated against the bench. Emily calling. I watched her picture appear on the screen. She was wearing a baseball cap backward. 22 years old. College graduation. Her arm wrapped around my shoulders. I let the call ring until it stopped. 5 seconds later, another call came. Then another. After that, texts. Dad, where are you? Please answer. I turned the phone face down beside me. The ducks didn't seem to mind. Back at the church, confusion slowly became concern. The wedding planner checked the hallway, the parking lot, the dressing room. Nothing. Nathan stood near the front entrance, adjusting his tie for the 10th time. Has anybody seen Daniel? He asked. No one answered. Victoria folded her arms. I'm sure he'll be back. She sounded confident, almost irritated, as though this unexpected inconvenience had interrupted a carefully planned schedule. 5 more minutes passed. Guests began whispering. Is something wrong? I thought the ceremony started at noon. Maybe the bride isn't ready. Nathan glanced toward the bridal suite. He'll show up. Victoria lowered her voice. If he doesn't, she paused. You can simply walk Emily yourself. Nathan stared at her. What? People won't know. They absolutely will. It doesn't have to become a scene. Nathan rubbed his forehead. My future father-in-law disappears 15 minutes before the ceremony. He looked directly at his mother. That's already a scene. She said nothing. At the lake, I folded the speech once more and slipped it back into my jacket. I reached for the silver chain around my neck. My wife's wedding ring rested in my palm. I tried, I said quietly. I really did. The water rippled against the shore. A little boy nearby laughed after dropping a fishing pole into the shallows. His grandfather helped him pull it back out. Neither of them seemed bothered. They were simply together. I wondered if I'd spent so many years protecting Emily from disappointment that she'd never learned what disappointment cost someone else. That thought hurt more than her text. The phone buzzed again. This time the caller ID surprised me. Harold Whitmore. I stared at the name for several seconds before letting it ring out. I wasn't ready to talk. Not yet. Inside the church, the atmosphere had shifted completely. The musicians stopped playing. Guests openly checked their watches. Several children had begun asking when the wedding would start. The wedding planner took a slow breath before walking toward the bridal suite. She knocked gently. Emily. Yes. We need to talk. Emily opened the door. She was breathtaking in her gown. Perfect makeup. Perfect hair. Perfect smile. Until she saw the planner's face. We can't begin the ceremony, the planner said softly. Emily frowned. What do you mean? The planner hesitated only a second. We can't start until someone explains where your father is. The wedding planner's words hung in the room long after she stopped speaking. We can't begin the ceremony until someone explains where your father is. Emily blinked. What do you mean you can't find him? We've checked the dressing room, the lobby, outside. Nathan stepped into the doorway behind the planner. I've been calling him. Emily reached for her phone before he finished the sentence. He always answers. She tapped my name. The call went straight to ringing. Once, twice, 3 times. No answer. Her stomach tightened. He must have left his phone somewhere. Nobody replied. Because everyone in the room knew something she hadn't admitted to herself yet. I hadn't forgotten my phone. I'd chosen not to answer it. My own phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Emily. It was Harold. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he sighed. Daniel. Harold. I figured you might be at the lake. I looked across the water. You remembered. Emily told us years ago. His voice sounded older than I remembered. Not weaker. Just tired. I won't waste your time, he said quietly. I owe you an apology. I rested my elbows on my knees. For what? For not stopping this before today. The breeze carried the smell of fresh cut grass across the shoreline. What exactly are you apologizing for? Another pause. Long enough to tell me the answer wasn't simple. Back at the church, Victoria was already trying to regain control. She pulled Nathan aside near the front entrance. Listen to me. I'm listening. We have almost 200 guests waiting. I know. So we adapt. Nathan looked exhausted. Adapt how? You escort Emily yourself. He stared at his mother. No. She frowned. What do you mean no? People know her father is here. Was here. They'll ask questions. So, Nathan lowered his voice. My future father doesn't disappear 10 minutes before a wedding unless something happened. Victoria folded her arms. Then tell them he's ill. Nathan shook his head. I'm not lying. It isn't lying if... It is. She looked around the sanctuary. Do you really want the entire day ruined over this? Nathan answered more quietly than before. I think it's already ruined. Harold's voice came through the phone again. Victoria started talking about appearances months ago. I closed my eyes. I guessed? No, he sighed. I don't think you guessed how far it went. He told me about conversations that had happened behind closed doors. How Victoria insisted the official wedding photographs should look balanced. How she complained that my old truck might be visible if I parked too close. How she'd suggested I change into different shoes after arriving. Small comments, tiny cuts, each one easy to dismiss by itself. Together, they painted a different picture. I argued with her, Harold said. I believe you. But not enough. His voice cracked slightly. I should have stopped it. I didn't answer. Because we both knew that wasn't the real question anymore. What about Nathan? I finally asked. Harold didn't hesitate. He should have defended you. And did he? No. The honesty surprised me. He said he didn't want conflict before the wedding. I gave a sad little laugh. Funny. What? Conflict came anyway. Neither of us laughed after that. Inside the bridal suite, Emily paced in circles. This doesn't make any sense. One bridesmaid carefully said, Did you two argue? No. Another looked down at her phone. You didn't say anything that might have upset him. Emily stopped walking. No. The answer came too quickly. She looked away almost immediately. One of the women noticed. Emily, it's nothing. What do you mean nothing? Emily swallowed. Her words faded. She reached into the small pocket sewn inside her dress and pulled out her phone again. The last text conversation with me stared back at her. The one she'd convinced herself was practical, necessary, temporary. She'd expected me to be hurt, maybe even angry. She had never imagined I'd simply accept it. Harold spoke again. Daniel. Yeah, I need you to hear something. I'm listening. Victoria pushed this. I waited. Nathan allowed it. Another pause. But Emily sent the message. The words settled over me like heavy rain. Not because I didn't know they were true, because hearing someone else say them made them impossible to soften. For years I'd found excuses whenever Emily disappointed me. She's stressed. She's busy. She's young. She's under pressure. But no one else had held the phone. No one else had typed those words. No one else had pressed send. Harold continued softly. I won't blame everyone else for her choice. I appreciate that. I'm ashamed of my family today. I looked at the wedding ring resting against my chest. So am I. Back at church, panic had spread quietly from room to room. Relatives whispered near the refreshments. The photographer checked his watch every 30 seconds. Children grew restless. Nobody understood why everything had stopped. Then one small mistake changed everything. Emily's maid of honor, Rachel, stepped into the hallway with another bridesmaid. What do we do? The bridesmaid whispered. I don't know. Rachel opened the screenshot she'd taken earlier. Emily had shown it to her after sending me the message asking, Do you think this is too harsh? Rachel had captured the screen because she'd wanted advice from Emily's Aunt Susan. She quickly opened what she thought was a private conversation, attached the screenshot, typed, What do I even say to her now? Then pressed send. A second later, her face turned white. Oh no. What? I sent it. She stared at the screen. You to the Carter family group. Not Aunt Susan. Everyone. Uncles, aunts, cousins, family friends. Within seconds, phones all across the church began vibrating. One after another. People looked down, read, then slowly looked up, toward the bridal suite. Near the second row, my older sister Carol covered her mouth. Oh, Emily. Beside her, Uncle Mike quietly removed his glasses. A cousin whispered, Please tell me this isn't real. Nobody answered, because there it was. My daughter's own words. No rumor. No misunderstanding. No twisted version of events. Just a simple message. Dad, don't walk me down the aisle. My husband's family would be ashamed to see you. An elderly aunt I'd barely seen in years stood up without realizing everyone could hear her. After everything that man did for her, silence spread through the sanctuary. It wasn't angry. It was disappointed. Some guests from the Whitmore side had also seen the screenshot by now. They exchanged uncomfortable glances. Even people who knew nothing about our family understood enough. No father deserved that. Emily finally stepped out of the bridal suite. Her gown shimmered under the church lights. Her veil fell perfectly behind her shoulders. She looked exactly like the bride she dreamed of becoming. Then she noticed the room. Conversation stopped. People weren't searching for me anymore. They were looking at her, not with hatred, not even with judgment, with something much harder to bear: disbelief. Emily's face slowly lost its color. For the first time that day, she realized everyone knew exactly why her father had disappeared. The wedding did not explode all at once. It fell apart quietly. That was almost worse. People didn't shout. Nobody threw anything. There was no dramatic movie moment where the bride ran down the aisle or the groom begged in front of everyone. Instead, guests started standing up in small groups. A cousin from Dayton whispered to his wife, and they slipped out through the side door. My sister Carol gathered her purse, her coat, and every bit of dignity she could still carry for our family, then walked straight past the bridal suite without looking in. An older man from the Whitmore side cleared his throat and said, "Maybe we should give them privacy." Within 10 minutes, the church felt half empty. Emily stood near the doorway in her wedding dress, watching people leave a ceremony that hadn't even begun. Nathan came up beside her. "What did you send him?" he asked. She stared at him. "You saw it." "I saw what everyone saw." His voice was low but sharp. "Why would you write it like that?" Emily blinked like he'd slapped her. "Why would I write it like that?" "That's not what I meant." "No, Nathan, say it." He glanced toward the remaining guests. "Not here." She laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "Now you're worried about where things happen." His jaw tightened. "My mother didn't type that message." "No," Emily said. "She just made sure I believed it." Nathan didn't answer. That silence told her more than any confession could have. The man she had tried so hard to protect would not even protect her when the whole room was watching. I got home a little after 3. The house looked exactly the same as it had that morning. Small ranch house on the west side of Columbus. Trim that needed repainting. A porch step I kept meaning to replace. 2 hanging baskets Emily had given me for Father's Day years ago, both long gone now, though the hooks were still there. I sat in the truck for a minute before going inside. My knee had stiffened during the drive from Alum Creek, and when I climbed down, pain shot up the side of my leg. "Well," I muttered, gripping the doorframe, "happy wedding day to me." Dry humor is what men my age use when tears are too close. Inside, I removed the tuxedo jacket and hung it carefully over the back of a kitchen chair. Old habits. You take care of things, even rented things. Then I loosened the bow tie, pulled it free, and set it on the table beside the folded speech. The house was quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. I changed into a soft flannel shirt and jeans that had faded at the knees. My body seemed to recognize them before my heart did. In the bathroom cabinet, I found the bottle of pain reliever, shook 2 tablets into my palm, and swallowed them with tap water. Then, for reasons that made no sense, I made coffee. It was late afternoon. I knew it would keep me up. I made it anyway. The coffee maker sputtered while I stood in the living room looking at the old bookshelf. On the bottom shelf sat a cardboard photo box with a bent corner. I hadn't opened it in months, maybe years. I carried it to the couch and set it on my lap. The lid came off with a soft scrape. There were whole decades inside that box. Emily in pink pajamas holding a stuffed rabbit by one ear. Emily asleep on my chest after a fever broke. Emily on the first day of kindergarten, one hand gripping her backpack strap, the other gripping mine. Then I found the Little League picture. 8 years old, missing front tooth, grass stain on her pants, plastic trophy clutched against her chest like it was made of gold. And me behind her, work shirt dirty, hair still dark then, electrical tape sticking out of my pocket. I remembered that day clearly. A panel job had run long on the north side. I drove across town with drywall dust on my sleeves and changed shirts in the parking lot, only to realize I'd forgotten the clean one. So I stood there dirty. And Emily didn't care. She ran to me anyway. "Dad, did you see it?" I saw the whole thing. I had missed the first 3 innings, but I saw her hit that double. That had been enough for her. I held the picture in both hands, and that was when I finally cried. Not loud, not hard, just one tear at first, then another. I didn't cry because I missed walking her down the aisle. I cried because I understood something I should have understood years earlier. I had taught my daughter that I would always absorb the hurt. That no matter what she said, no matter how far she pushed, no matter who she became around other people, Dad would still come. Dad would still fix it. Dad would still stand there smiling so she wouldn't have to feel guilty. That was my mistake. Love had turned into permission, and I had handed it to her. The sun went down slowly. The coffee turned bitter in the mug. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't answer the phone. Emily called 17 times. Nathan called twice. Harold sent one text. I am sorry, truly. I read that one. Didn't answer. At 9:17 p.m., headlights swept across my living room wall. A car door closed. Then came footsteps on the porch. Slow, unsteady, a knock. Dad, Emily's voice cracked on that one word. I stood in the hallway, my hand resting against the wall. Another knock. Dad, please, open the door. I moved toward the front window and looked through the narrow gap in the curtain. She was still wearing the dress. The hem was dirty, now gray from pavement and church steps, and whatever else she'd walked through after her perfect day collapsed. Her mascara had run beneath both eyes. Her veil was gone. She didn't look like a bride anymore. She looked like my little girl after a bad dream. Dad, she said again softer, please. My hand went to the lock. Every part of me wanted to open that door. Every old instinct woke up at once. Comfort her. Bring her inside. Make coffee. Tell her people make mistakes. Tell her tomorrow would be better. But then I saw my phone on the side table, and I remembered the words. My husband's family would be ashamed to see you. My hand stayed on the lock. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry, baby, I whispered. Then I stepped back. Emily knocked once more. I reached over and switched off the porch light. Through the curtain, I watched her shoulders drop. For a long time, she stood there in the dark. Then she slowly sat down on the porch step of the house where she had always been forgiven. This time, the door stayed closed. The first thing I heard that Saturday morning wasn't birds. It was the creak of my porch swing. For a second, I forgot what day it was. Then I opened my eyes and remembered everything. The wedding, the text, the church, the empty house. I looked at the clock on my nightstand. 6:40 a.m. For 30 years, I'd been an early riser. Retirement hadn't changed that. My body still believed there was work waiting. I pulled on my slippers and looked through the front window. Emily was asleep on the porch swing. The wedding dress was wrinkled beyond saving. Her hair had fallen loose around her shoulders, and the morning dew had settled across the fabric near the hem. She looked cold. She looked exhausted. She looked 31 years old. And somehow, for just a second, she also looked 3. I stood there longer than I should have. Every father knows this feeling. The part of you that wants to erase your child's pain never really goes away. But another part of me had finally learned something yesterday. If I rescued her again, she'd never understand why she was hurting. I walked quietly into the kitchen. The coffee maker clicked on with the familiar sound it had made almost every morning for 15 years. 2 mugs, not 1. I wasn't ready to forgive her, but I wasn't going to pretend she wasn't my daughter. When the coffee finished brewing, I carried both cups outside. The screen door squeaked. Emily stirred. She blinked against the morning light before sitting upright. For a moment, she looked confused about where she was. Then she saw me. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. Morning, I said. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. I placed 1 mug on the small table beside the swing. She wrapped both hands around it without drinking. I'm sorry. The words came out before anything else. I nodded once. I know. Silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable. Just honest. The neighborhood was beginning to wake up. A newspaper landed somewhere across the street. Someone started a lawnmower a few houses away. Life kept moving whether families healed or not. Emily stared into the coffee. I didn't sleep. I noticed. I kept thinking maybe you'd come outside. I almost did. She looked up. You did. I had my hand on the lock. Her shoulders shook. I'm sorry. This time she cried openly. I know saying it doesn't fix anything. No, it doesn't. Several minutes passed before either of us spoke again. Finally, Emily whispered, I never wanted to hurt you. I looked at her carefully. I believe that. She seemed surprised. You do? Yes. I took a sip of coffee. But not wanting to hurt someone isn't the same as choosing not to. She lowered her eyes. I was trying to keep the peace. I gave a small, tired smile. Between who? She didn't answer. So I did. Between your father and people who'd already decided he wasn't good enough. She winced. It wasn't like that. No. She shook her head. They kept making comments. I know. You know, I know more than you think. She looked genuinely confused. They said your truck looked embarrassing. I know. They said your suit looked old. I know. They kept talking about the wedding pictures. I know. Her voice became smaller. They said people would notice. I nodded. They did notice. She covered her face with both hands. Oh, God. No, Emily. I leaned forward. They noticed yesterday because you agreed with them. She started crying again. Not loudly. Quietly. The kind of crying that comes when excuses finally run out. After a long silence, I stood. I want to show you something. I walked back inside and returned with the folded speech. I wrote this almost 3 weeks ago. I handed it to her. I was going to read part of it during the reception. She unfolded the pages carefully. The blue ink looked slightly faded after spending yesterday in my jacket pocket. Read the beginning. Her voice trembled. My beautiful Emily, when your mother died, I honestly didn't know if I was strong enough to raise you by myself. Every morning, though, you'd wake up, look at me, and say one word. Daddy. That one word gave me another reason to get out of bed. She stopped reading. I can't. Keep going. She wiped her eyes. I used to think the hardest day of my life was the day your mother died. But I realized something while writing this speech. The hardest day isn't losing someone you love. The hardest day is trusting that when you finally let them go, they'll remember they were raised with love instead of pride, and kindness instead of appearances. She couldn't continue. The paper shook in her hands. I didn't know. No, you didn't. A pickup truck pulled into my driveway. I recognized the dark blue Chevrolet before the engine stopped. Harold Whitmore climbed out. He wasn't wearing a suit anymore, just jeans and a polo shirt. He looked like a man who hadn't slept much either. Emily stood immediately. What are you doing here? He looked at both of us before answering. I'm here because there are things that need to be said. He walked onto the porch. Daniel. Morning. I'm sorry for coming without calling. It's all right. He turned toward Emily. I already apologized to your father. She swallowed. I know, but I haven't spoken honestly to you. No one interrupted him. Harold took a slow breath. Your mother-in-law was wrong. Emily nodded through tears. I know. Your husband was wrong. She closed her eyes. I know. Then Harold's voice became firmer. But neither of them held your phone. Emily's shoulders dropped. You did. She didn't argue. You had every opportunity to tell Victoria no. I know. You had every opportunity to tell Nathan this wasn't acceptable. I know. You had every opportunity to come to your father instead of sending that message. Tears rolled silently down her face. I know. Harold looked toward me. I spent too many years choosing the quiet path in my own marriage. His expression carried decades of regret. I kept telling myself that avoiding conflict was the same thing as keeping peace. He shook his head. It isn't. He looked back at Emily. Peace without courage is just surrender. The porch became very still. No one raised a voice. No one defended themselves. The truth didn't need volume. It simply sat there with us in the morning sunlight. After a while, Harold quietly excused himself. Before leaving, he placed a hand on my shoulder. I hope one day she'll earn back what she lost. So do I. He drove away. Emily remained standing on the porch. Finally, she whispered, Dad, yes, I know you love me. I do. She looked at me with the same frightened eyes she'd had after childhood nightmares. Can we go back? I thought about the little girl who had once asked me to braid her hair, the teenager who hugged me after graduation, the woman who had sent me the cruelest message I'd ever received. All three were standing in front of me. I love you, I said quietly. I always will. Hope flickered across her face. Then I finished. But I won't be the place you come back to only after you've helped other people shame me. She closed her eyes. Not because she disagreed, because she finally understood. For the first time in her life, love wasn't rescuing her. It was asking her to change. 4 months later, the leaves had started turning again in Columbus. The maples along my street had traded their summer green for shades of amber and red, and the mornings carried just enough chill to remind my right knee that winter wasn't too far away. Life had settled into something quieter. Not easier, just quieter. People often think healing arrives all at once like flipping a light switch. It doesn't. It's more like rewiring an old house. You replace one damaged wire at a time, hoping the next room will finally stop flickering. Emily and Nathan never had the wedding they'd planned. The ballroom reservation was canceled. The florist refunded part of the deposit. The photographer quietly mailed back the unused balance without anyone asking. For a while they stayed together, trying to convince themselves that surviving public embarrassment meant they'd survive marriage too. It didn't. Not immediately anyway. Without the pressure of a 200-person wedding, they began seeing things they had ignored before. Nathan finally admitted he had spent years avoiding difficult conversations because disappointing his mother felt impossible. Emily admitted she had spent just as long believing that acceptance from other people mattered more than honesty with the people who already loved her. Neither confession fixed anything overnight, but at least they had stopped lying to themselves. Several months later, they chose to have a small ceremony instead. Just immediate family, no country club, no elaborate reception, no perfect photographs designed for strangers. A week before that ceremony, a card arrived in my mailbox. Inside was a handwritten note from Emily. Dad, I understand if you don't come. I haven't earned that place back yet. I only wanted you to know that this marriage will begin differently than the one we almost had. I read it twice. Then I picked up my pen. There wasn't much to say. Sometimes the shortest sentences carry the most weight. I wrote, build a marriage on courage, not image. I signed my name, nothing more. I didn't attend the ceremony. Not because I wanted to punish her, because forgiveness and trust aren't the same thing. She had asked for forgiveness. Trust still needed time. A few weeks later, my phone rang on a Sunday evening. Hi, Dad. Hi. Did you eat dinner? I did. What did you make? I smiled. You're only asking because you think I probably burned something. She laughed. I was actually thinking chili. You know me too well. The conversation lasted 8 minutes. Nothing important happened. We talked about football, the weather, whether my tomatoes had survived the first frost. When we hung up, I realized something. She hadn't called because she needed money, or advice, or rescue. She had simply called to see how I was doing. It was a small thing. But real change usually starts with small things. After that, Sundays became our day. Not every week, but often enough. Sometimes she'd bring coffee from the little cafe near my neighborhood. Sometimes we'd watch a ball game. Sometimes we'd barely talk at all. One Saturday, she showed up wearing old jeans and work gloves. I brought paint. I looked toward the backyard fence. You remembered. You said last spring it needed it. I did. So, she shrugged. Let's stop talking about it. For the next 4 hours, we painted wooden fence boards. The work reminded me of when she was a teenager helping me stain the backyard deck. Except this time there wasn't awkward silence. There wasn't guilt hanging over every conversation. Just two people learning each other again. Around lunchtime, she wiped sweat from her forehead and laughed. I forgot how much work this is. I tried warning you. I thought you were exaggerating. I've raised you. I know exactly how stubborn you are. She grinned. I learned from somebody. About halfway through the afternoon, she looked toward my old Ford parked in the driveway. Can I borrow the truck? You sure? My car's in the shop. The keys are hanging by the back door. She returned 40 minutes later, carrying lumber from the hardware store. After shutting off the engine, she stayed sitting behind the steering wheel for a moment. When she finally climbed out, she ran her hand across the faded hood. I used to think this truck was embarrassing. I leaned against the porch railing. I remember. She smiled sadly. It isn't embarrassing. No. It's just... She searched for the right words. Old. I laughed. That's probably the nicest thing anybody's said about it in years. She laughed too. Then her expression softened. It got me everywhere I needed to go growing up. It did. I never thanked you for that. You don't have to. I do. She handed me the keys. I understand now. I also began changing. For years, almost every part of my identity had started with the words Emily's father. There wasn't anything wrong with loving my daughter. The problem was forgetting I existed outside that role. One Tuesday morning, the pastor at our church asked whether I'd consider volunteering with a local trades program for teenagers. They need someone who can teach basic electrical work. I've never taught. You've been teaching your whole life. So I said yes. Every Wednesday afternoon, I met with young men and women who wanted to learn practical skills. Most had never held a wire stripper before. Some couldn't tell a breaker panel from a water heater. One afternoon, a 16-year-old named Marcus looked at a switch box I just finished explaining. I'll never be as good as you. I handed him the screwdriver. You don't have to be, he frowned. What do you mean? You just have to be a little better than you were yesterday. He smiled. For some reason, saying those words helped me as much as they helped him. I wasn't just somebody's father anymore. I was Daniel Carter, retired electrician, teacher, neighbor, friend. There was still plenty of life left to live. Late one Sunday afternoon, Emily came over carrying 2 coffees. I found something. She reached into her bag and carefully pulled out a folded stack of paper. My wedding speech. I found it tucked inside Mom's Bible. I nodded. I put it there. She looked at me carefully. I never finished reading it. You can. She unfolded the pages and quietly read the final paragraph. Wherever life takes you, never forget whose daughter you are. You weren't raised by wealth. You weren't raised by appearances. You were raised by a man who fixed broken things because giving up was never an option. If anyone ever makes you ashamed of where you came from, remember this: your home was built with love long before it was ever filled with money. Her voice broke. She lowered the pages into her lap. I'm sorry it took me so long. I know. She reached over, not for a hug, just to hold my hand. This time I let her. We sat together on the porch while the sun disappeared behind the trees. Neither of us needed to fill the silence. Some things don't heal because the right words are finally spoken. They heal because people begin living differently. I still wear my wife's wedding ring on the silver chain around my neck. I still drive the same old Ford. My knee still aches when rain is coming. Some parts of life never change. Others are worth waiting for. Children don't owe their parents perfect lives, but they do owe them basic respect. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: loving someone doesn't mean accepting every wound they give you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for them and for yourself is to finally draw a boundary. If this story reminded you of someone who quietly gave everything for the people they loved, I'd be honored if you shared your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes hearing another person's story reminds us that we're not carrying our burdens alone.